Hey everyone, Genome here. Well, I'm here to answer yet another call for a subscription contest. This one is for JLS's 2,000 subscriber contest. Congrats on that big number, by the way. You have some great content, and I encourage anyone who happens to be watching this video to give his channel a check out. So the submissions for this contest are pretty simple. Comes in two parts. First, you have to name your favorite comic book, say, series or story arc. So usually a little more short-term runs, that sort of thing. Both of mine are, I believe, 6 and 7 issues respectively, but I have to choose just one. The second is to give a shout out to another YouTube channel that I think everyone should be checking out. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get into part 1. Okay, so probably my two favorite story arcs actually center around probably two of my favorite characters in comics, and that is the Punisher and Captain America. Both of these story arcs take place over between 6 and 7 issues respectively, so they're really insular and small time frames in the realm of Marvel Comics. They're both from the early 90s, and which was around the time of my, I guess, peak of comic book collecting. So, but they were both really great stories, self-contained. Even though they both kind of branched off to a few more issues after the story arc, they were pretty much self-contained. So let's go ahead and get into my two favorites. My favorite story arcs were the Punisher Final Days story arc and the Captain America Streets of Poison story arc. Both had really good artwork. For the Punisher, it was Hugh Haynes, and for Captain America, it was the super talented Ron Lim, with an added bonus of him being paired up with Amy Blondie, which was one of the stronger anchors, I think, who ever worked with Captain America. So of those two, I'd probably have to give the slight edge to the Streets of Poison story arc. Cover art for both was pretty good. Some of the Punisher Final Days ones were a little iffy, but let's go ahead and run through the Punisher first, and I'll go ahead and show you the comics, and then I'll tell you a little about the story arc. So starting with the first. This one's actually a two-part cover. It's got this brown kind of one-poster paper sack look, and then the inside it has, which is a pretty questionable cover, it's like a live photo shoot picture here. And probably the best cover of them all is the final one. Okay, let's go over that story arc just a little bit. Warning, major spoiler alert. If you had planned on reading either one of these series and hadn't done so already, you might want to stop now if you don't want the surprise ruined. I won't go into every little detail about them, but I will give you the overall gist of the story arc. So in the Punisher The Final Days series, Frank Castle is basically turned into the puppet of the Kingpin. The Kingpin, through a young advisor of his who's trying to make his way up the ranks, decides to use the Punisher as his trained attack dog to take out a rival competitor. I believe it's Howard Nees was his name. Just another drug dealer who is horning in on Kingpin's territory and attacking his operations and that sort of thing. And in order to do so, comes up with a plot to kidnap Microchip. Now, for those in the know of the Punisher, Microchip was his, I don't know how you would describe him, his basically only friend, and he helped Punisher design all his weaponry and his battle vans, and he was a computer guy, hacker, and that sort of thing. So Microchip is successfully kidnapped, and in a kind of a brutal scene from the get-go, Microchip wakes up with the Kingpin in his office, and the Kingpin describes what's going to happen, and he actually has a minion take a hatchet and cut off one of Microchip's fingers. I believe it was his index finger on his right hand. He asks him if he's left-handed, which really makes the scene kind of brutal, and mails it to the Punisher. So the Punisher is told to meet with the Kingpin at the Fisk building the next evening to discuss the details. Well, you know, of course he shows up guns blazing, and he blows a bunch of people up, and gets up there with the Kingpin, realizes he's in a trap room, there's no way to get to him, and basically agrees to do the Kingpin's wet work for him. Unbeknownst to the Punisher, even though I'm sure he expects it of the Kingpin, is he's going to be double-crossed. So even after he takes care of Knees, he's expected to be arrested. This turns out to be the case because the Punisher successfully kills Knees and most of his gang and is finally arrested, and which is a nice touch to his character because he's kind of put in a situation where he can get away. He's being surrounded by police, but he makes mention of he can still get out of there, but he's going to have to kill some police to do it. And rather than do that, he gives himself up. His attorney is actually a hidden operative of the Kingpin, and who pleads him out on a deal, but the Kingpin's in cahoots with the judge, and he's given, I think, 30 years at Rikers Island instead of a medium security facility. And so, as you can imagine, the Punisher is not a, shall we say, popular prisoner to have in the facility. And from the very get-go, even in the county holding cell, and he's having to fight for his life from basically the onset. Well, he gets to Rikers, and within day one, he finds out that Jigsaw's in there, one of his arch nemesis, and he's gotten in well with one of the factions in prison. So, there's a little bit of prison back and forth. Frank is again attacked several times, has to fight himself out of these situations. And then finally, Jigsaw brings a bunch of people in at once, overwhelms them, they hold him down. Jigsaw completely butchers his face. He cuts him up so he looks like Jigsaw, and puts him in the infirmary. He doesn't kill him on purpose because he plans to do that later, letting Frank suffer a little bit longer. But a botched prison breakout attempt for actually another prisoner allows the Punisher to escape. This part's a little corny because the prisoner who's supposed to be getting broken out was black, and the Punisher's white, and his cohorts didn't notice for a couple days, even though they were taking care of the guy. Now, keep in mind, his face is completely bandaged up, but his arms and legs are still visible. But whatever, that's just the pill you gotta swallow when you deal with comics sometimes. So he gets out, he's stumbling around trying to find another one of his caches. He's trying to hook up with the microchip, who has been released by the Kingpin in another country, but he makes his way back. And the Kingpin, being a man of his word, he didn't kill Microchip and he let him go when the Punisher finished his assignment. But the Punisher, his face is infected, he's sick, he's getting delirious, he's having to take drugs to kill the pain, which he doesn't want to do, how his feelings are on drugs and all. So, long story short, Microchip, with a lot of cash, finds a ex-doctor who is actually a junkie, but that's all they could find, that'll work with him, because the Kingpin has word on the street that he wants the Punisher dead, and he's offering like $100,000 for anyone who can kill him. So, everyone's hounding this guy. So they meet in some back alley kind of surgery, kind of like from Batman the movie, when the plastic surgeon worked on the Joker. And apparently this doctor, with an amazing coincidence, used to work with specialized grafting and I believe it was cell and tissue regeneration. So basically, he asked her for a whole new face so he can kind of disappear again and reappear when he gets better. After several days, he wakes up and demands to see a mirror. And this is where Marvel really took a chance and did something different, completely different, off the wall. She's telling him you might not recognize yourself when you look in the mirror, so just be prepared, and I've cut your hair to match your look and all that. Well, it turns out she grafted a black man's skin all over Frank Castle, so now the Punisher is black. And he stayed that way for several issues after this series, but it was a real shocker. No one saw it coming. But it was a brilliant little turnabout there. So, but the whole story arc is really good, I think. Once again, other than some rather outlandish, comic book type action scenes, it's a much more personal and human level, like it usually is with his stories. This is not some, world-ending menace is happening. It's just one man's plight. He has his mission. He's caught, incarcerated with a bunch of, of prisoners and bad guys that just want him dead, and he's got to fight for survival the entire issue. Unlike most of the other issues in his series, most of the books in this story arc are him being the hunted at this point. He's no longer really in control of things. Other than him taking out the rival of the Kingpin, he's hunting him. After that, everyone's hunting the Punisher. So I think it was a great story arc and very worthy of mention. and obviously one of my favorites. Okay, my other favorite story arc, and this one's also from the early 90s, is Captain America's Streets of Poison. And this one had some great art, a great story, and some great characters in here. It's got a little bit of everybody as far as Captain America goes. You got, of course, Cap, Black Widow's in there, Diamondback, Red Skull, Crossbones, Bullseye, Daredevil's in there. It's just it's a plethora of characters in there, and what is, once again, I would have to call it a very insular plot. While some of what happens at the end of the story act does carry on through some more issues, they kind of retcon it with a I don't know, it's kind of a cheesy Deus Ex Machina, but I won't ruin that for you. But anyways, I kind of liked it better the way they left it at the end of this, but I can see why they had to retcon it a little bit to keep the character going for another 1,000 issues or however long they wanted them out for. So I'll go ahead and show you some of the covers, which are some great covers, by the way, and then we'll get on to the story arc. So here we go. Alright, so let's talk a little about the Streets of Poison story arc. So Captain America is infiltrating a drug operation, and inadvertently an explosion happens. They're cooking up crystal meth there. And because of the explosion doesn't kill him, but it causes him to inhale a mass amount of these meth fumes. And it bonds itself to the super soldier serum in his body. So basically, he is a walking meth super soldier. He can't sleep, he's strung out, he gets more and more erratic, he starts turning on people who are his allies and friends. He gets really brutal with some criminals, much more so than he normally would be. But in his mind, no, he still thinks, you know, he's the good guy. He still thinks he's the regular old Captain America. But basically, he winds up fighting everybody in this. He fights and beats up Daredevil, he fights and beats up Diamondback, he fights against Bullseye, he fights and beats up Black Widow. Eventually he fights and wins against Crossbones, but that's a little bit later on. So he runs a gamut of fights in this story arc. So his Avenger counterparts and all that are trying to reel him in. It's just Black Widow and Diamondback at this point. The others are off doing something, I can't remember what, and a few others of the human characters. But, you know, none of them are really a match for Captain America. So they're having a real hard time reeling him in. Eventually they do wind up getting him back to the lab, and they go through a process of trying to separate the crystal meth contagion, or whatever you want to call it, that has attached itself to the super soldier serum, but they realize they can't do it, so they have to give him a full blood transfusion and get it completely out of the system. So that means he's no longer Captain America with the super soldier serum, he's just Captain America, the man. Meanwhile, there's a subplot in there, which actually all ties into what happened to him, of the Red Skull trying to move in on the Kingpin's drug dealing enterprise. It all comes to a head where the Red Skull meets up with the Kingpin at Shea Stadium, of all places, at like 2 in the morning, with his henchmen and then the Kingpin's henchmen there. And they have a little banter back and forth, talking about how the Red Skull is trying to destroy America with drugs. That's just one of his other plots. And he accuses the Kingpin of trying to do the same thing and calls him a hypocrite. Well, the Kingpin says he's pulling almost his version of Apocalypse here by weeding out the weak with drugs, so only the strongest of Americans survive, and it makes a stronger country and all that. And they go on and on and on. And basically, Red Skull puts it to the Kingpin that since they're diametrically opposed and the Kingpin won't work with them, he doesn't like to work with Nazis, that they should fight to see who gets to keep their operation. You know, the loser has to get out of the drug business, and the winner takes all. So the Kingpin agrees. They fight in like this impenetrable little dome that the Red Skull sneaks in, and it's a pretty long battle, a good fight. Eventually the Kingpin overwhelms him, forces him to quit, and the Red Skull says he gives everything up. So right before all this happened, Cap had kind of regained consciousness. He's back out in the world. He's trying to still drill down on what's going on with this whole drug thing. So he's flying around on his sky cycle, but remember, it's just Captain America now with no super soldier serum. So he winds up at the Shea Stadium. He sees that the lights are on, and he goes to check out what's going on. And Crossbones sees him while Red Skull and Kingpin are still, distracted with fighting. So he goes up to investigate. Well, he runs into Cap, and of course they start fighting. Now, because there's no more super soldier serum in Cap's blood, Crossbones is stronger than him. So it's a really tough fight. And Captain America kind of narrates through the fight what's going on, how he's starting to get tired, he's getting winded, that he's not as strong as Crossbones, so they're back and forth. So basically Captain America is having to rely on his expertise in combat and his courage and his determination to win out. And eventually he finds a weakness on Crossbones, takes advantage of it, and actually wins the fight. And I believe they did that in a pretty non-cheesy way too, because you can see that he was just outmatched. But they didn't give him some stupid, by the power of good win. He actually had to win with a fairly dirty tactic, which was a interesting touch. So Cap goes down and he confronts the Kingpin. Red Skull's already left in his helicopter. There's nothing to hold Kingpin on. He just says that he tried to get the Red Skull out of town. So they all part ways. At this point, Cap is back at the compound, Avengers compound, and I can't remember if it was Hank Pym. I think it was Hank Pym. But someone came up and told him, hey, we found a way to separate the meth contagion that has attached itself to the super soldier serum. Basically, they strained his blood. So now it's just his blood with the super soldier serum. So they can put it back in him, and he'll be the same old Cap again. And like the last couple of frames is this Cap saying, no, I don't want it. Captain America is not a drug. Captain America is the man, or the idea, or the ideology. So I think that was a really stupendous way to end it. It shows what kind of person that Cap is, and how he really was the perfect choice for the original super soldier serum, because it was really him. I mean, while the super soldier serum gave him the edge for all those years, it was his determination and drive and sense of what is right and wrong that made Captain America. So it was just a beautiful way to end the comic, and once again, it's kind of out of left field there. People didn't expect him to give it up. So that was just a great story arc. So of the two, I would have to go with Streets of Poison as being my favorite story arc. It just had a little more meaning to it. Most of the overall plot was, I would say, more consistent. Better drawn for the most part. Just all around, I think, a little bit better. And it had a great message to it. So, well, there's a long dissertation of part one. Well, part two should be much shorter for those of you whose eyes are glazing over. I'm gonna go ahead and shout out two YouTubers right now, some channels I think y'all should be looking at. The first one is Casual Unboxing. He focuses on opening up any myriad of things on camera and explaining what they are and showing you. He has got just a great little setup. I love the visual look of his videos, and he just has overall quality content. Great channel. The other one is one I've more recently discovered, and that one's JLS Comics and Pop Culture. He's got around 500 subs now, so he's growing up pretty good. But yeah, he has some great content. You can tell, man, he gets energized about comics nowadays. So he's a lot like I was when I was younger. So before I got more jaded and bitter. But anyway, I think that's gone on long enough. So there's my submission. I hope y'all enjoyed it. Make sure to check out JLS's channel. Like I said before, he's got a lot of great content on there. And if you would like, head over to my channel and check out, see if there's anything you like there. I upload a couple times a week usually, so and there'll be plenty more to come. So anyway, JLS, thanks for putting the contest out there. Hope you enjoyed my submission, and it's been fun talking about these story arcs. So anyway, thanks again for watching, and this is Genome out.